Hello there, I'm Alan from the New York City Public School Literacy Collaborative. You can follow me on LinkedIn to know what events we're offering. Very happy to share with you an amazing virtual authors event that we just wrapped up with Marina Budhos. In this video, you get to hear directly from Marina as she unpacks how she writes fiction and then how she does research for nonfiction text. You're also going to see a very unique format in which we have polls and quizzes about the author for students to be engaged during the process. So please enjoy. We hope to see you at our next virtual authors event. Thoughts. I'm your host for today. I'm Alan. That's my daughter. She loves reading and meeting authors, and that's a really great component here that we get to go virtually and meet authors and learn more about text. So I'm just so honored to be part of this work. We are doing this K through 12. This is our high school division. Samir is one of our partnership directors at the New York City Public School Literacy Collaborative. He is unable to make it today, but he is here in spirit. He is the one that makes sure all the payments go through and that we get all the amazing authors here with the help of Michelle, the executive director of Meet the Writers. Good morning, Michelle.
Hey, hi, Ellen. How are you? Thank you so much to students and teachers. It is so wonderful to be with you today. I'm Michelle Weissman, and I run education nonprofit Meet the Writers. Meet the Writers has reached more than 45,000 students with powerful programs that connect students to inspiring authors like Marina Budhos and their books. You could learn more at meetthewriters.org. I am so pleased to continue the collaboration with the New York City Public Schools Literacy Collaborative that we started more than 6 years ago. Huge thank you to Alan Feltus, Samir Talati, and their team for their work to make this virtual visit happen. Now, it is my great privilege to introduce author Marina Budhos. Marina is an award-winning author of fiction and nonfiction, often focusing on the lives of immigrant teens, including Ask Me No Questions, Watched, and her latest, We Are All We Have. She is a professor of English. She was a professor of English at William Patterson University and frequently gives talks throughout the country and abroad. Marina lives in New Jersey with her husband and 2 sons. Now let's give a warm welcome to author Marina Budhos.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. So I'm coming in from New Jersey, but I want to just tell you guys, well, I'm not going to, no, we've got a trivia question, so I'm not going to tell you anything actually, right, Alan? We'll
Wow,
let them
right.
cover.
Well, you took my first question, but that's fine too. Everyone in the room, where are you Zooming today? And you're Zooming, you said, from New Jersey. Why New Jersey?
Yeah. So that's where I moved. I crossed the river. But the part that that's still on the quiz is I'm in New Jersey now. I'm even off that. I think I'm off the edge of that map. But where did I grow up?
Oh, well, that's going to be a poll question later. Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot that's familiar there when I look at that map. So yes, I'm in Maplewood, New Jersey.
Got it. And it looks like many of our audience people are out in Queens. So thank you, Queens, for being here today and representing, having the largest amount of people from that borough. Who's in the room? What grade is represented most today? Marina, do you have any, why YA? Why this age group to write about or write for?
Okay. Well, one reason is I like to say I never grew up. I'm still on some level a young adult in my head, in my heart. And as such, I have just a lot of stories I want to tell. And then I started raising boys who were young adults, and I could watch what they were going through. And there were a lot of stories in my head. But most importantly, I feel like young adult and middle grade books are just really exciting because it's an opportunity for me to tell stories that weren't there when I was growing up and make visible to all of you the kinds of stories that need to be on the page and told. And so it's really a passion of mine. And I'm both telling stories that come from inside of me, but the stories that I see out there that aren't told.
Heard. I'm just thinking about who's in the room, and today we have a majority of middle school students joining us today. And I'm thinking of the two books that I read, the primary characters were high school seniors or close to graduation, but their younger siblings were in middle school.
That's right. That's right. And middle schools are really, really, it's a crossover moment, right?
Mm.
Not with elementary school, you're not quite in high school, and you're in this mixed moment, right? And there's a lot of different currents and confusing things that are happening to you when you're in middle school, and you're growing so fast too. You can have a sixth grader who's this height, and you can have an eighth grader who's that height. And so it's a really, really important. So yes, it is true. Some of my books have had middle schoolers who are featured, but sometimes it's that younger sibling. And in my most recent book, you have those younger siblings in there.
Heard. Let's see what is next for us. Our audience at home, which of these books do you want to read? These are all of Marina's fictional titles. And then Marina, I'm sorry to ask this, but which one's your favorite?
I was saying that that's one of the worst questions to ask an author. It's like asking a mom, which one is your favorite kid? Really? But what I will tell you is very often your favorite book is the one that you've just written. So for this year, it's We Are All We Have. But if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said The Long Ride. So it's always the book that you've just finished reading and you've been so inside of it, you just love it so much. So that's really my answer. So for now, just this year, it's We Are All We Have.
It's my favorite work of yours so far too. It's most fresh in my mind. Now, I'm getting some information from our audience, and watched is the highest response. I'm wondering if it's because of the cover. I think it's very important to cover. I mean, the inside is important, but to have someone want to pick up the book and read it, and that eye is really looking at me. Can you talk to us about Watched, a little bit about the decision?
I'd love to talk about it. Yeah. And I think it's a very cool cover. It's kind of mysterious. Somebody's running at eye, like who is watching? Who's the watcher in this, right? And by the way, for all of you in Queens, it's set in Queens. There's a lot of Queens in that novel. And what I can tell you it's about a high schooler, Naeem, also like my character Rania, about to graduate, though he's not such a great student, and he gets in trouble. And he's really aware of being watched by the police. There is something called surveillance going on. He is a Muslim teenager, and the Muslim community is being watched. And he gets in trouble with the law, and he's offered a deal. Will he watch his own community? So I'm not going to tell you what happens, but that's the choice he's made. And so again, Naeem has to go on a journey figuring that out. And there's a lot of Queens and a little bit of Brooklyn in the landscape that he is running around in.
Now I'm having an aha moment. Is that your first male protagonist character?
Now that is a great question. Yes, come to think of it, I hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely right.
Right, because in Ask Me No Questions and We Are All We Have, they're both valedictorians and they're going to college. So to hear that there's a book that I could read, if I'm a middle schooler out in the audience, that deals with making poor choices or redemption or not being the perfect student but still succeeding, that's very interesting for our teachers to think about too when we're recommending books.
Yeah, and trying to find who his heroes are so he can write himself. And he's confused.
So kids love fiction, but it's like vegetables. They may not always love nonfiction. So I'm just curious. I'm not going to ask which one is your favorite. Which one took the most amount of research to gather and get the book published?
Right. And very different kinds of research in all three books. All right. Remix is conversations. I had to kind of go out and interview kids. And so there was just like a lot of traveling and interviewing. I also took my own photographs in that book. Eyes of the World was another kind of research, but I'm going to focus on Sugar Changed the World, because Sugar Changed the World took the longest time, because, you know, it's such a big topic. We basically were covering 5,000 years of history, and we had to boil it down. And so how do you cover 5,000 years of history of when sugar was first discovered and cultivated all the way to now? And so that was a book that took a long time as we really tried to figure that out. And we actually worked with New York City teachers, 2 summers in a seminar where we would present the material and ask them, what did they think would be the best way of bringing this story of sugar, which has changed so many lives, which in fact was the driving the driving ingredient behind slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, and moved so many people and changed so many lives. So we were asking them, how can you bring this into the classroom? So this book took longer in part because we took the time to ask the teachers how to use it in the classroom and what would be helpful to them.
Yeah, I found it fascinating, the history starting with beehives and then the scaling up of manufacturing and the Industrial Revolution. So for our social studies teachers that are watching, this book is perfectly aligned to global history's curriculum. And you know what? You've convinced our audience. I'm looking at the data, and they also want to read Sugar Changed the World. So you did a great job selling the book. So it's good for the adults and for the students, because I had many aha moments. Like, really?
Yeah.
I never look at M&Ms the
lot
same
of,
way.
You know, I'm going to give you one quick aha that I'm not giving anything away, which is we learn about slavery in all of our classrooms, of course, but what's the percentage of slaves that actually came to North America? Most people would answer 20, 50, 70%. It was 4%. Because what we don't realize is the slave system for sugar was all over the Caribbean and Latin America. And so that's in fact where many of the slaves went. Many of them eventually came to the US, but 4%. So there are a number of aha moments like that.
Now you got the math teachers interested too, statistics, probability. So all teachers read this book for a variety of reasons. So let's do our trivia showdown. Audience at home, did you go to her website? Did you watch her videos? Did you read her books? Well, there's no book specific questions here, but let's find out. Anything on this page that you'd like to talk about? Anything capturing your interest, Marina?
Well, I love that picture of my boys, I will say. And what I do want to say about, that's my older son, Sasha, and my younger son, Rafi, who himself is a high school senior now. And the true fact is they now tower over me. They are 6'3". And so that picture I love because it's when they're still little enough. And now I have these giants where it's very hard to give them a hug. It hurts my back a lot. So it's one of my favorite pictures. And I actually think it was taken on Mother's Day. So there's something very sweet about them. And they are a big inspiration. I think of them in my head. When I wrote Watched, my older son, Sasha, read it, and there was a little bit of him in there. Some of the struggles he had as a boy. And so I was able to, and some of the brother relationship stuff always helps feed me in my stories.
Well, I think you've given us a little clue about the writing process to use personal experiences.
Yes, the beauty of fiction is you can hide out a little bit in the fictional story, but you're still plucking and taking from your own life. And I find that really helps because you're not just trying to follow things as they happened. You're telling a story, but you're drawing from yourself. And that's when you know you're engaged and it matters.
Wow. That was really deep, and we're switching to something really light. I'm so sorry we get so deep in thinking here. Where did Marina grow up? Was it New York, Texas, Bangladesh, Los Angeles? Marina, do you feel or believe that where you are from shapes you, impacts you, does as a
Absolutely.
writer, as a human?
How could it not? How could it not? It's inside of you. What was outside of you is inside of you. The landscape, the people you grew up with, how people talked, how they sounded, right? One thing in my writing is I really write multicultural fiction, people of all different backgrounds. And that's partly because of the voices I heard. And, we hear rhythms and sound, and place is so important in our books. So I think it matters as a writer. I think it matters for all of us as human beings. And it's important for us to think about where we come from, right? And maybe we come from more than one place, or maybe we come from somewhere, but our parents came from somewhere else, and that also influences us. So all of that soup is who we are. And so certainly for me as a writer, not just where I grew up, but where I've been, where maybe I've also lived at various times, has come into my head and seeped in there.
Okay, if you're just joining us, it's not too late to join our trivia show. The link is in the chat. Well, the largest percentage of people said Bangladesh, but that is not true because it's New York City.
Yes.
How do you feel? Does that happen a lot where someone would think that you are not from New York City?
Yeah, I think it happens a lot because my imagination and sort of what I know. I did actually live in Bengal see, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you've lived somewhere and that space really enters you. And so I grew up in New York City. I'm a New York City kid like all of you guys. And what's wonderful about New York City is people come from all over. And there are so many neighborhoods that are, we have little Bangladesh, we have little Guyana, we have little India, we have little Greece. And so in so many ways, all of those places are in New York City. So the answer is I grew up in Queens. And then to add to that, I grew up in a community that was built for United Nations families. So I really grew up in a very globally diverse, all my friends were from all over. So it never felt like I was just from New York or just from the USA. I couldn't be, because we all had families that were all over, and, people came from all over. So New York City, but a very, very specific place that I grew up. It was called Parkway Village, and it was a really wonderful place to grow up in New York and in Queens.
Queens, that's the borough for the day. Now, speaking about future job employment for our audience, here's some possibilities that await you if you love books like Marina. But which job did Marina not hold? Librarian, editor, teacher, journalist. Do you have your dream job now?
I so have my dream job now. When I was growing up in Queens, I had a red rug, I had a lot of books, and I liked nothing better than to kind of lock myself in my room and write and imagine stories. And in fact, what I did, this is something that people don't realize about writers. They think we're kind of anti-TV. I was never anti-TV. I was allowed to watch TV. But then what would happen is I'd watch my favorite shows. I'd go up into my red rug room. And at night, I would rewrite the scripts in my head of the TV shows I saw. And so I think I was practicing to be a writer, and my mother would open the door and say, "Go to sleep." You'd shut the door, and I'd continue writing in my head. And so being a writer, I think, was always something I wanted to do.
Heard. Now, I'm only asking this question for our middle schoolers and high schoolers in the audience as they think about future career prospects. You mentioned TV, you mentioned books. Which one, if you turned your book into a movie, what would make more money? Publishing text or straight to Netflix? Not
Which
me. Not for me, but for our audience, future writers and directors out there.
which one of my books? I think maybe Watched perhaps might be. There is actually a director who's working on that. And that same director and I are working on converting We Are All We Have to a movie, not a series. So I've been working with people who are trying to get it done. We didn't get a chance to talk about, we will, my nonfiction book, Eyes of the World, is another one a director's trying to turn into a series. It's a long haul, with trying to get things to TV, but those are three of the books I could imagine. And The Long Ride also, which is a middle grade book for you middle school folks out there. I could see that as a TV series. It's set in the 1970s in Queens, believe it or not. Boy, that's the theme here. And that's another one I could imagine. What makes the most? That's out of my hands. That's beyond my pay grade.
Well, if we have you back in a couple of years, we could add a new category of your job. Would it be a screenwriter? Would it be a producer? What's the connection to transfer from text to film?
Sometimes it's that you let somebody just run with it, right? They want to do it and they run with it. Sometimes, as in the case with We Are All We Have, I'm just in the initial stages of talking with a director where we're considering collaborating together and we will write it together. I would be a fellow writer. We're just at the very, very, very beginning steps to figure out if the way we see it will be the same, right? Because when you work with someone else, it's very different than when you write a book yourself. Very, very different process.
So our audience is split between a librarian and a teacher. So let's do the big reveal. Ooh, you were never a librarian. And was that by choice or?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It never occurred to me to be a librarian. I love librarians. I love being in libraries. In fact, another little Queens trivia fact, I was one of those kids who willingly used to go down to the main branch in Jamaica and just hang out there. I was interested in local history. So I used to go to the Long Island room and look at old maps in the Queens Library. I also can remember literally getting my first library card when I was 4 years old. Wow. So I love libraries, but it never occurred to me to be a librarian. I can't say why. But all the other things I have indeed done.
Well, yeah, it seems pretty packed. You have a pretty packed history with the other jobs. So there's only so much space in our chronological
We
time.
didn't include the fact that I was a waitress too at one point.
What? I have to talk to my interns here at the office to figure out what happened with our research. So I apologize. So that'd be interesting if you would incorporate. Right now, the characters are working at a restaurant and I'm reading the book. So it makes me think, again, personal life, bringing it into the field. You talk about showering, like you write about showering at the end of the shift and getting the grease off, and just some really great figurative language. But we don't have time to read every part of your book. Our next question, everyone at home, is with whom has Marina co-written books? Interesting. Is it her brother? Is it her father? I don't remember this. I don't remember what I put. Is it her son? Who is it? Okay, father, brother, college professor, son. We have one for uncle. I was surprised by this. This was an aha moment for me. So our answer is, everyone at home, here we go. Your husband, what is that like? You wrote these two books or collaborated together. I mean, please tell us, how does that work and have a happy marriage?
This is the question we always get. And by the way, Eyes of the World is actually about a couple that collaborated. They were photographers and they worked together. They were in love and they worked together. It's also sadly a very tragic story because they were covering war. And I'm not going to tell too much, but you can imagine. Anyway, what's it like? It's actually a lot of fun. My husband is the first person I go to test ideas out, to talk about my ideas, and vice versa. I can't imagine. Now, we have offices. My office is on the second floor. His office is on the third floor. We need a little distance, right? We cannot be on the same floor, but we sort of meet somewhere like in the kitchen and talk a lot. So in fact, I would say working on books together, the things that we love, because he's also a writer. He also teaches. He's passionate about children's literature. He's passionate about nonfiction. And so the exciting thing is that was actually the easy part. Yelling about who walks the dog and empties the dishwasher, much, much harder. So daily life is much harder, but working on books, that is really easy. And we're very different as writers. We approach writing so differently that I don't feel like we're competing. It doesn't feel like a competition. It feels like it's two different people with two different talents. He thinks about things in terms of big ideas and structure, and I'm a storyteller. I come from fiction into nonfiction. I want to evoke for you the world. So we've had a couple of battles about how we approach things, and of course, I always win, but it's really interesting because that's what's lovely about collaboration. It's one of those, when you pick the right project, sort of two is greater than what you can just do on your own, but it has to be the right project.
Well, thank you for sharing. You're making me think of collaboration and the writing process. And I tell students the number one financial decision you make is your partner for life.
Yes, you're collaborating in so many ways.
So what work has Marina not published? So Vogue or fashion? Well, we already saw that book. Oh, we're down to two. We know that you do fiction and nonfiction. This was another aha moment for me, just of how complex and amazing you are. I'll just give away the answer. Can you tell us more about the writing here? I remember this moment. You wrote this response here. The cons, real triumph over Trump.
Yes. You know, it was a moment, I had recently published Watch, and I was very much dealing with Islamophobia, and I had written a lot about, how the Muslim community had been targeted. And when I saw the father of this fallen soldier speak at the Democratic convention and his wife next to him, and this is a grieving father, first of all, everything about him was so familiar to me. His body language, how he spoke, and the great dignity with which he spoke. I had to speak to that, because in a very noisy political moment, it's sometimes these quiet moments that pierce through. And I really felt I needed to speak to this maelstrom, this terrible, terrible whirl of targeting that had happened, and how the great dignity with which this man spoke, and how he was the true American in so many ways.
So students watching at home, you can Google this and watch the video on YouTube. And again, this is just another opportunity to share that your work and work of authors can go beyond the ALA classroom. This would definitely be a great topic to discuss in social studies as well, or as a whole school.
What I wanted to mention, and this is true for all of you as students, we shouldn't be boxed in, right? Like, I write fiction, I write nonfiction. Sometimes I write essays like this if I'm so compelled, or articles. Don't allow ourselves to be boxed in and too overdefined. I think that is like stereotyping, right? We all have many capacities. And so this article was another capacity because it mattered so much to me.
Okay. Again, going from a very serious topic to, and the answer is, I'm so just shifting back and forth.
I like the up and down.
It's like, oh, well, that was really deep. Make sure everyone watches the video. And by the way, she has not done fashion. Could you tell us why? Could that be a possibility? Is because you said stereotypes being boxed in. What would it take?
And you know what? Here's the crazy
thing.
I love fashion and I love clothes. So, and if you read my novels, you see my characters are, like The Long Ride opens with three girls, just first of all, like prancing around in the bedroom, but choosing what pair of boots they are going to all buy so they wear the same pair of boots to the first day of 7th grade. So I'm totally into fashion. So that it's
Vogue,
the question.
Vogue, if you're listening, there's perhaps a demographic that could be represented here. But you're right. You mentioned where they shop. Oh, we're at Target and we're getting these things. There is an attention to clothes. So that's why we chose the fashion lens. So Marina, it has been such an honor to chat with you and to ask you questions and hear from our audience what books they want to read now that they're learning more about you. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to ask you to continue working, and we'll do the read aloud and just talk to us about fiction.
Okay, so I'm going to read aloud from We're All We Have.
And I'll project it for the students.
Okay. That night, like all nights, is the hardest. The cries that pierce the dark. There's an air conditioner in our window, but even with the gurgling hum, still I can hear them, the shuffling, restless sounds of other children. Lost children. I keep seeing the desert that Carlos described, a terrible dry field riven with cracks and fissures. Too many sounds, those who call out in terror, or the ones who whimper. The others, like Rosa, who are numb and shiny-eyed, mute, which is worse. I see all the faces of the social workers, drawn and tired, the art therapist who keeps coaxing children to draw what they feel. I climb up the bunk ladder and gaze at Kamal, stroking his hair. I just want to look and touch him over and over. He rolls over, mumbling, "What?" Nothing, I say. Hours tick by, graduation in 3 days, Instagrams blown up with my friends at school, a party in Prospect Park, another in someone's basement, Fatima selling braided hair ties with the school colors, purple and white. But it's senior day at Coney Island that most gets me. I play that Post-it over and over, Fatima dancing on the sand, blowing kisses. Her curly hair bounces. Her shoulders are bare and tanned, which must have freaked her mother out. Her whole face shines like a lit up sun. Everyone celebrating without me. I dream about the desert, about glittering stars and bones. I've disappeared. So this, as mentioned, is from my most recent novel, We Are All We Have. And it's a moment somewhat just kind of in the first third of the book. Our character, Rania, as mentioned, is in her last year of high school. Everything seems to be going well. She's actually going to go to Hunter College in Manhattan. She's growing up in Brooklyn. Her best friend is Fatima. They're all excited about graduation, but Rania is an asylum seeker. And what happens is, I'm not giving anything away, but in the very, very opening of the novel, there is something called an ICE raid, where the immigration authorities come and they swoop her mother away. And she is kind of in a crazy free fall, left with her brother. So this little passage that I read is her brother and they both of them have been taken somewhere where other children are. And she's not even going to be, at this point, it doesn't look like she's going to be able to even attend graduation, and all her friends are marching on. And that's where she is right now. So I wanted to read that just to, I know that's the kind of heavy sequence, right? And also it's so much about Rania and her now being left to take care of her little brother.
Marina, I'm wondering where you got the idea for that story.
So one of the wonderful things about doing a Meet the Writers event is that I have gone to different schools through Meet the Writers. And literally, I had been thinking about a book. It was sort of rattling around in my head a little bit. I knew it was going to be a New York City book. I kind of knew it had to do with people who were seeking asylum seekers, which we hear about a lot in the news, but I wanted to make it very real, okay, for readers. And I was on a subway car going to a school visit when literally I saw Rania across from me. I had a vision of her. Fortunately, I didn't start talking to her because I think people might have thought I was a little, not all there, but I could see her. And I started seeing who she was. She's a poet. She wants to write. She's kind of fierce. She wears black combat boots. She was on her way to school, just like the school I was going to. And then when I finished with my visit, I was charged up from the visit and I came back and I saw her again. So that was the beginning. And when I start to see my characters, an idea that's kind of up here starts to become very grounded for me.
Marina, I'm wondering what happens when you don't have that idea, or you're starting Rania's story and then you get stuck. Like, I wonder if you could tell some of the people listening, what do you do when you get writer's block?
Writer's block is tough. And I don't always get, once a story gets going, I rarely have writer's block. So for me, once the momentum happens, I'm in a pretty good place. But where I can get writer's block is starting. Starting is the hardest. And that's where I'm walking around the world thinking, I have no idea who I am. What am I doing? It's like everything is up for question until that moment, like that moment on the subway where it starts to grab me. So when you ask what to do, sometimes walking away and doing something else or reading another writer, suddenly it percolates and perks me up. And I'm like, oh, wait, I can do this. So it's either reading or walking or taking a swim, or actually one of my great inspirations is I love museums. Taking in the visual really helps me a lot. So it's like kind of going away from it, you can go toward it.
It's funny, I've heard other authors say that it's critical to have a dog, that you must walk. And so that you get up and you work on your work, and then you have to take the dog out, and that gives your mind, time to process and have new ideas.
I do have a dog, but for some reason I resent walking. I'm going to have to work on that.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
So now you're speaking to students and teachers. Is there anyone who made a difference while you were in school? I mean, it sounds like you were propelled to be that person reading and rewriting.
But you know what? It makes a huge difference. And so, in fact, somebody recently asked this question. One, was there a particularly inspiring teacher? And did you ever reunite with her and tell her that? And I had two inspiring teachers, my third grade teacher and my fifth grade teacher. Both of whom I re-met as an adult. Sadly, one of them passed away, about a year ago, but they were so creative. They were such creative teachers, and they really, really encouraged us to try things out. In fact, I remember writing a TV show with a friend in my fifth grade class. And I remember with my third grade teacher going out, and we were asked to sort of draw the trees. We would build things in the classroom. And so I think these were just really, really very, very encouraging of creativity. And especially my fifth grade teacher, because by that time I was writing a lot. She would write in my report cards, Marina really does have a gift for language. Maybe this is something she'll do. And so I think it did stick in my mind.
That's amazing. I wonder now if we have time to switch gears, Alan, and talk a little bit about, Marina, your nonfiction writing. And I think we have an image to show too.
Absolutely. Great transition.
Okay. So I do write nonfiction as well. And I like to think of myself still being a storyteller. In addition, when I went to college, I studied English, but I was also like a history minor. And I'm something of a history geek. Whenever my family and I go on vacation, we're like always, doing sort of historical tours and archaeology, because we just love filling in history. It's so interesting to us. So this, as I mentioned, is a book that is about a real couple, like my husband and I, who were photographers together in the Spanish Civil War, which was the war that led up to World War II. Less known, in fact, but very, very important. And so the way I like to think about fiction versus nonfiction is fiction is what if. Maybe there's a nugget of something that I'm taking, let's say like Rania, asylum seekers. I did do research, nonfiction research, to understand the immigration law. But then I go into what if. I go into the imaginary characters. But with nonfiction, I think of it as what is, right? I am there to tell stories and explicate and raise questions about what did in fact happen or what is. But it does require a little bit of detective work. So I would love to bring that photo up. So this is a photograph that Robert Capa took when they were in Spain during a battle. That's a general that's walking down the stairs. And is there anything you notice in this photograph?
Well, I see that the general is not alone.
He's not alone. And who is he with? Who else is there? Well, I'm going to fill you in because this goes from the what is and what if part, right? So in that right-hand corner, what you're looking at is Gerda Taro, Robert Capa's partner. She is dressed in a raincoat. She is holding a Leica camera and she has a beret. I mean, I had to really blow it up. But what was so wonderful about that is it meant when I wrote the section of them walking around Madrid, I knew what she was wearing, going back to clothes. So I could evoke it like a novelist and talk about Gerda Taro in her long raincoat and her wool beret. And that was actually when she started using that camera. So I could talk about that. So you always, as a writer, I was in that part of me that loved libraries. I was in the archives, poring over photographs, moving from photograph to photograph. I was looking at letters, anything that would give me details so I could then build it up and create a picture for you in your mind. So it was almost like the fiction writer in me was building a story based on what is the history, but it had to be based on what truly happened, right? So right there, I got a little clue. So it's really fun because you're like a detective when you are a nonfiction writer.
And now I wondered, I mean, it might be difficult to say whether you prefer one or the other, fiction or nonfiction. And actually, I want to segue into if you could share with us what you're working on next.
What I'm working on next. So I'm working on a few things. I always have, like, I call it my lazy Susan of projects, and some are close to being finished and some are very early stages. So I actually am working on a novel for adults. I put it to the side. Someone else is reading it right now. So that has been drafted. And we always write in drafts. You know, we have to write many drafts of our books. So that's put to the side. I'm also working on a nonfiction book similar to Eyes of the World. That's a proposal put to the side right now. And so I'm burbling with new ideas. In fact, in 2 days, I have to talk with my editors about my next book. I think it may be set in Queens. I think it's going to have some magic in it. It is for middle grade readers, and it's set during the 1964 World's Fair. Some of you in Queens know that big Unisphere. So I think that's what the next project is going to be. And then I was just explaining before this program started, I think I'm going to work on my first picture book, which I've never done. And I'm very, very excited about that because it's called Clap Clap Roti, and it's about the specific kind of roti that they make in Guyana that we all learn to do. And it's a way of telling the story of Indians who came across from India to work the sugarcane fields, and they brought with them this tradition of making clap clap roti.
Cool. Well, it sounds like you're very busy. And I'm wondering if you could share your writing process. Do you wake up at a certain time and write for a certain amount of words or hours? Or do you just sort of write on the go when the inspiration strikes you?
When I'm in the middle of a project, I'm very, very disciplined. I'm very undisciplined when I'm not. And in fact, that's when I walk around wondering who I am in the world. But when the project gets going, I'm pretty disciplined. And it isn't so much page numbers. I have friends who work with page numbers and counts. That never really worked for me, but it's sort of like, oh, I've got to get to the end of that chapter. Oh, I've got to solve this. If I'm in a revision phase, I may have like a list of things I have to work on. And then I start to have, let's say I'm revising. I might say, I want this revision, this version to be done in a month. So that's how I'll work. And then I'll start working my schedule around that. I try to work when I was teaching, I often worked in the mornings and then I would go teach in the afternoons. I'm no longer teaching, and it's actually harder not to have a structure. So I got to use that dog walking a lot more. But I like to settle in at some point in the morning and start writing when I'm doing a project. And then when I'm in an in-between phase, I'm kind of like I'm like a restless dog, moving around, jotting ideas down. I'm a little all over the place.
Well, thank you for that. And I think your husband will thank you if you walk the dog. So
Yes.
take care of two birds with one stone.
I think you solved something here.
Alan, I wonder
encourage
if we want to move to the wrap up.
Oh, the wrap up. Yes. If you have any questions, our audience at home, please put them in the Q&A. Michelle is looking. Michelle, my takeaway from that was the what if versus what is. And I'm just thinking for our teachers out there to use that type of framing. I can see an anchor chart for it to help our young writers really clearly and in really easy, understandable terms to differentiate between the two in your audience in the style. And then we had one of our trivia questions about fashion, but if you do clap, clap, roti, then we could do a cooking component too when we see you in a couple of years. Is very curious. And the science behind the cooking as well, just thinking of all the different teachers.
That's right. There's a whole thing about breaking down the gluten when you're kneading the dough. So
I'm hungry because it's getting close to lunch, but really excited about just sharing with the audience just the breadth, the scale and scope of your background and your knowledge, and you just write whatever it feels like is interesting to you.
Yeah, and I guess what I want to encourage other students, I want to encourage all the students to think about the one thing we all have is curiosity, and you never know where curiosity will take you. And I feel very fortunate as a writer to be able to follow my curiosity and try to convert that into different books. But all of us have curiosity. So, allow that curiosity for your own writing, but allow that curiosity for the books that you're going to go read. Let it, scratch that itch of your own curiosity.
So final thoughts for you. That almost sound like final thoughts, but I also want to connect to the quote here. Can you tell us a little bit more about it and your final words to our audience?
Yeah, a number of my books clearly deal with very heavy topics. And in this is coming from my novel, Ask Me No Questions. And it is about an undocumented family right after 9/11. And, sometimes there is that elder who kind of crystallizes how we have to deal with that tough stuff that comes in from the outside. all of us in a way want to run away from bad news, right? Hide our heads. But sometimes there is that way in which we discover our inner courage to sort of stand there and fight.
So thank you. I want to ask more questions, like who inspired you to fight? Who inspired? But we don't have the time. It's coming to an end. And with that, I just want to cue the applause that you can't hear in the classes. And for us to remind our audience that all of your books are located on Sora, which students can use their DOE account and read or listen. I listened to both the books that I prepared for today. And it's just so amazing to hear the characters and the voiceover. It's just not like how it used to be, really boring and dry. So
Audible books and audiobooks are awesome.
So all of these books are available. Please go on Sora, check it out. A thank you to everyone that has joined us today. Marina, thank you so much. Michelle, I'll let you do the closing thoughts, but it's just an honor to do this work where I'm in a school building every day, encouraging students to read, supporting teachers and tier 1 and intervention work. But then we get to bring the person behind the book, into classrooms.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And thank you for the questions and the quiz questions. They were so fun.
Thank you so much to Alan, to the New York City Public Schools Literacy Collaborative, and especially our author today, Marina Budhos, for sharing so many ideas and thoughts, your wealth of experience. It was really tremendous today. So thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to next time.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.